This mound is an eyesore. We're improving the community.
Stop! This is protected wildlife habitat.
They called it that ugly mound. That's where the trouble breed a stubborn rise of earth jutting up behind my modest ranch house, tangled with wild shrubs, ancient oaks, and the kind of untamed grass that whispers secrets to the wind. To the HOA board, those slick real estate types, and especially their iron-fisted president, Susan Grant, it was nothing more than a blemish on their cookie-cutter suburb, a heap of weeds and dirt spoiling their grand plans for uniformity and curb appeal. But to me, Robert Hayes, it was the pulse of the land itself, the final stronghold of raw nature in a neighborhood that had surrendered to asphalt driveways, vinyl siding, and perfectly edged flower beds year after year. I'd called this place home for over 30 years now. My parents had scraped together every penny to buy the lot back in the late 80s, when the area was still rural outskirts, nothing but a gravel road snaking through fields of scrub oak and hardy juniper. They hammered together our simple ranch-style house themselves, board by board, long before any homeowners association swooped in with their rulebooks and fines for unapproved mailbox colors. Mom and Dad raised me right here, teaching me the quiet lessons of the wild, how to spot the faint tracks of white-tailed deer in the soft soil, the patient shuffle of turtles emerging from hibernation, and the rhythmic calls of birds migrating south each fall. As a kid, I'd roamed that mound barefoot, my skin scratched by thorny blackberry vines, my eyes wide as I watched a red-shouldered hawk ride the thermals overhead, its cry piercing the afternoon silence. After a long career with the U.S. Forest Service, 30 years of enforcing regulations, surveying habitats, and fighting to preserve what little wilderness remained, I retired and came back. Not just for the memories, but because I knew the mound needed a steward. It wasn't mine by deed alone. It was legally shielded, part of the state's natural heritage inventory, a designated haven for at least 2 species on the endangered list, the eastern box turtle, with its domed shell and deliberate gait, and the short-billed crow, whose sharp calls echoed like warnings through the trees. But knowing that required more than a glance. You had to be the type to kneel in the early morning mist, tracing the dew-kissed paths of creatures that had outlasted civilizations, not the sort who saw dollar signs in every undeveloped acre. Susan Grant was the latter type. She ambushed me about 6 months back at the annual neighborhood enhancement meeting, held in the community center with its fluorescent lights and stale coffee. She sauntered up in her power suit, lipstick a bold red slash, a silk scarf knotted just so around her neck, smiling like she was doing me a favor. "Robert, we're finally tackling those eastern views," she announced, thrusting a glossy brochure into my hands. It depicted a fancy pavilion with tiered seating, picnic areas, and string lights all superimposed right over my mound, as if it had never existed. I blinked, staring at the rendering. "That's my property, Susan. Private land." She let out a light laugh, the kind that dismisses without engaging. "Oh, I know, but it flows so seamlessly into the common greenbelt, doesn't it? We thought you might be open to contributing it for the greater good of the community, of course." Her eyes sparkled with that calculated charm, but I could see the wheels turning. "Contributing?" I echoed, my voice steady but firm. "You mean donating?" "No, thanks. It's not for sale or giveaway. Besides, it's protected under state conservation laws, habitat for endangered species." Her smile didn't falter, but a flicker of impatience crossed her face. "Well, that's what we assumed, but your fencing is so minimal. No proper gate, hardly any markers. It's tough to tell where your lot ends and the shared space begins." I felt my temper stir. "It's clearly mine, surveyed and deeded. And the turtles? They don't care about fences. They've been here longer than any of us." She paused, her expression hardening just a touch. "There's really no need to make this difficult, Robert. We're all neighbors here." I wasn't being difficult, I was being honest. But from that instant, I knew I'd become a problem in her Aisa's stubborn variable, messing up her tidy architectural dreams. People like Susan don't like loose ends. They tie them up or cut them off, figuratively at first, and if that doesn't work, literally. The following months dragged on in uneasy silence, too quiet for comfort. Then the harassment began, subtle at first, and sign notices shoved under my door or tacked to my weathered gatepost. One warned of elevated fire risks due to unmanaged vegetation. Another fretted about potential pest infestations from excessive overgrowth near community trails. A third nitpicked non-compliance with neighborhood aesthetic guidelines, as if my wild mound offended their sense of order. I chuckled bitterly at the absurdity, but it rankled. These weren't just petty gripes. They were probes, testing my resolve. I fired back by contacting the county land use department, reconfirming my parcel's grandfathered status, its private ownership, and the biological restrictions tied to it. I even pulled up the federal listings for the eastern box turtle as a species of concern, cross-referencing the 2009 population survey I'd personally contributed to during my Forest Service days. Everything checked out, no violations, no need for permits on my end. Still, a knot of worry twisted in my gut. I'd seen enough land disputes in my career to know when trouble was brewing. To prepare, I started patrolling the mound every day at dawn and dusk, my boots crunching over familiar paths. I installed motion-activated trail cameras hidden in the underbrush, their lenses capturing the subtle movements of wildlife. A turtle ambling toward a burrow, crows hopping between branches. I GPS logged every nest and burrow I spotted, creating meticulous folders, both physical binders stuffed with printed photos and digital drives backed up in the cloud with timestamps, species identifications, and habitat notes. It felt like a one-man war, waged with data and determination rather than shouts or lawsuits. But in my line of work, I'd learned that records were often the sharpest weapons. I should have known Susan wouldn't stop at notes. Maybe I overestimated the HOA's respect for boundaries or underestimated her ambition. One fateful morning, at precisely 6:15 a.m., the low growl of diesel engines shattered the pre-dawn quiet. I jolted awake, heart racing, and dashed outside in my flannel pajamas and muddy boots. There it was, a massive bulldozer lumbering up the mound's back slope, its blade ripping through ancient brush like it was tearing paper. Shrubs crumpled, saplings snapped, and clouds of dust billowed into the crisp air. "What in God's name are you doing?" I bellowed, waving my arms wildly over the roar. The operator, a burly guy in a fluorescent vest and hard hat, leaned out of the cab and blinked at me. "Clearing for site prep. Orders straight from the HOA office. This is private property. You're trespassing. Stop right now." He shrugged indifferently, as if I were complaining about the weather. "Talk to the board, buddy. I'm just paid to move dirt." Fury surged through me, but I didn't waste time arguing. I sprinted back inside, grabbed my Nikon camera, and returned to document every brutal pass of the machine. The damage was already heartbreaking. Bushes flattened into mulch, young trees uprooted and discarded like trash. Then, in the churned soil, something caught my eye, a glint of red, half buried under the debris. I knelt down, my knees sinking into the fresh earth, and brushed away the dirt. It was the shattered shell of an eastern box turtle, its intricate patterns crushed beyond recognition. My stomach turned. This wasn't just destruction, it was death. I didn't scream or break down. I raised the camera and snapped photo after photo, capturing the evidence in stark detail. The machines didn't pause. They ground on, oblivious or uncaring. By the time the sun crested the horizon, the entire northern slope lay flattened, a raw scar of exposed topsoil bleeding into the morning light. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in my dimly lit garage, the shattered shell on the workbench before me, my thumb replaying the camera's footage over and over. Susan had sneered at the mound as ugly, blind to its quiet beauty, the way sunlight filtered through the leaves, the symphony of bird calls at dusk, the slow miracle of turtles emerging each spring. But the law didn't care about her opinions, and neither did the creatures that called it home. The mound had been a sanctuary, and now it was a battlefield. The following morning, I stepped out with a steaming mug of black coffee, the steam curling in the cool air. Yellow caution tape fluttered mockingly in the breeze, cordoning off the devastation like party streamers at a wake. It wasn't a celebration, it was a funeral for the land. Piles of uprooted brush lay stacked like fallen soldiers, roots twisted and bleached by the sun. The air reeked of diesel exhaust, churned dust, and raw insult. I didn't need to wonder who orchestrated this. Susan's fingerprints were all over it. At exactly 9 a.m., I marched to the HOA office, a smug little building at the end of a cul-de-sac, disguised as a model home with beige siding, pristine flower beds, and those phony colonial columns that screamed, "Trying too hard." I didn't knock. I pushed through the door. The receptionist, a mousy woman named Carla, looked up startled. "Mr. Hayes, where's Susan?" I cut her off. "In the conference room, but you need an appointment too late." I'd already shouldered open the door. Inside, for board members clustered around a polished table, poring over blueprints and renderings. Susan presided at the head, her lipstick matching her blouse, her face a mask of cool detachment. She didn't flinch at my entrance. "Ah, good morning, Robert," she said, as if we were chatting over brunch at the country club. "We were just reviewing Phase 2 of the East Ridge Pavilion project." My blood boiled. "You bulldozed my land. Destroyed it without warning." Susan sighed, tilting her head in feigned sympathy. "Robert, I understand you're upset, but after reviewing historic boundary maps, there's some ambiguity. It might fall under the community's extended easement." "Ambiguity? My deed is on file with the county. Boundaries GPS surveyed and confirmed." "You knew that?" She shrugged elegantly. "Even so, for community safety and beautification, we proceeded. That slope was a fire hazard unmanaged, overgrown." "You're not a fire marshal, Susan." "No," she replied sweetly, "but we consulted one." I leaned forward, my knuckles white on the table. "You killed protected species. Endangered ones. You tore through federally acknowledged conservation habitat." Her smile remained intact, but her eyes hardened. "I'm not aware of any such designation. Nothing in our HOA records marks it as protected." "That's because you never bothered to check with the state or feds. You just assumed you could steamroll it." Harold, a silver-haired board member with a perpetual squint, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mr. Hayes, perhaps we can resolve this civilly. No need for drama." I let out a harsh laugh. "Civil? You forfeited civil when you sent bulldozers at dawn without notice." "Civil is what I offered when I said no politely." Susan snapped her binder shut. "If you insist on pursuing this, file a formal grievance. But I'll warn you, the board has top-notch legal counsel, and this initiative is already funded in our budget. Fighting it could get expensive." She was baiting me, gauging if I had the resources or grit to push back. What she didn't realize was that my 2 decades in environmental enforcement had equipped me with more than grit. I had ironclad reports, networks, and the bite of federal regulations on my side. I left without another word, the door slamming behind me. Over the next 48 hours, I did what I did best, built an airtight case. I printed every damning photo of bulldozers mid-rampage, the crushed turtle shell, the uprooted shrubs with hollowed-out nesting spots visible. I retrieved copies of that 2009 Eastern box turtle study from the State University's Environmental Sciences Department, where I'd co-authored sections on population dynamics. My old field journals came out of storage, pages filled with handwritten entries, sketched maps, and decade-old GPS data. Then I made the calls. First to Laura Thompson, a former colleague who'd climbed the ranks to regional biologist at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. "Laura, it's Robert. I've got a disaster on my hands." "How bad?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "HOA bulldozed my protected mound. At least 5 turtles dead, possible crow nests destroyed. They're calling it community improvement." She whistled low. "And it's your private parcel?" "Every square foot." Without hesitation, "Send me the files. I'll start a case immediately. If it's as you say, they violated state and federal conservation laws big time." Next, the State Department of Natural Resources, then a sharp environmental land dispute lawyer I'd crossed paths with years ago. I didn't revisit the mound that day. I let them keep digging their grave. But that evening, standing on the edge of the flattened slope, grief hit me harder than anger. This land had been my anchor, a sacred tie to my parents' legacy, and I'd let it down, even if just for a moment. Then, a faint rustle in the debris, a dragging sound under tangled roots. I knelt, parted the branches carefully, and there it was, a juvenile turtle, shell cracked like a lightning scar, front leg bent awkwardly, but eyes blinking, alive. I scooped it up gently, its weight feather-light in my palm. "I've got you, little one," I whispered. I named him Lucky, for beating the odds. By Friday, the tide began turning. Laura called back. "We're deploying a full team Monday morning. State bio surveys joining. Be there, it's going to be eye-opening." Susan must have sensed the storm, because Saturday brought a note in my mailbox, her handwriting neat and controlled. Robert, please reconsider your complaints. The HOA is eager to collaborate with all homeowners. Let's settle this internally, without external interference. No signature, just the veiled threat of keeping it quiet. I crumpled it and tossed it aside, spending Sunday staking out GPS points with laminated tags and brewing strong coffee for the dawn patrol. Monday arrived crisp and clear. I stood at my driveway's edge in my faded Forest Service vest, mug in hand, as the black Suburbans rolled up at 8:12 a.m. Sharp. Out stepped 3 biologists in field gear, 2 fish and wildlife agents with badges gleaming, a state conservation officer, and even a photographer from the local Gazette tipped off by an old buddy who owed me one. Susan emerged from the HOA office across the way, her crimson blouse impeccable, but her face drained of color at the sight of the convoy. I didn't wave or smirk. I just murmured under my breath, "Welcome to the mound, folks." The small indignities of the scene burned into my memory. The artificial lavender air freshener wafting from the HOA's utility truck parked insolently on my gravel, masking the diesel stink. A construction worker's half-eaten breakfast burrito discarded atop one of my 2-year-old field markers for hibernating turtles, now crushed flat. The world had been eerily quiet before the machine struck, birds silent, sky still gray. Now, it was a war zone. 1 excavator, 2 backhoes, 5 workers in neon vests, Susan's Lexus idling like a getaway car. I approached the foreman again, camera slung over my shoulder. He avoided my gaze behind mirrored sunglasses. Not HOA comments. He scratched his jaw. We got the go-ahead. Talk to her. Jerking a thumb at Susan's car, he yelled at an operator to resume. I stormed over. Susan stepped out slowly, folding her sunglasses with deliberate grace. Robert, you're up early. I stared, silent. She exhaled sharply. This project was greenlit after thorough record checks. You've had chances to object. You're no planner or ecologist, I retorted. And definitely not a conservation officer. Her voice turned clipped. You've been warned about fire risks and unsightliness. We acted for the community. It's protected habitat, not according to our database. Your database tracks dues and lawn heights, not ecosystems. She arched an eyebrow. Then you should have spoken up sooner. I did multiple times. You ignored me. That's when it hit. She wasn't listening because facts didn't matter to her. Control did. With her bulldozer humming, she held the power, so she thought. I retreated to the ridge, gritting my teeth, and filmed relentlessly. Every blade slice, every clod of earth flung aside, broken nests, trampled flora, animal tracks severed mid-stride. GPS cords uploaded in real time. By mid-morning, half the slope was stripped bare, tire tracks scarring the land like veins. Dust coated my teeth, but I persisted. At 11:42 a.m., a gray government truck arrived. Laura stepped out with another agent. Susan's distant face went ashen. Right on time, Laura said, surveying the mess. 5 turtles counted dead, 1 alive in rescue. Nests obliterated, crows, possibly fox burrows collapsed. She nodded grimly. Active investigation now. The agent ordered. Halt work. Permits. Confusion rippled through the crew. Susan strode up, fuming. What's this? Laura handed a clipboard. Assessment for Endangered Species Act violations, Migratory Bird Treaty, state statutes. Cease immediately. This isn't federal. Susan sputtered. But it's documented habitat. You authorized its ruin. I didn't know. Ignorance isn't a defense. Engines coughed silent. The quiet was heavy with dawning consequences. The day unfolded like a controlled avalanche. State officers taped zones, measured erosion, combed for evidence broken shells, soil samples, drone footage. An intact nest emerged, 3 pale blue eggs in rubble. Susan's scream pierced the air, hands shaking, hair wilting. You can't shut us down. We had plans. Laura stood firm. You didn't shut a project, you committed ecological vandalism. Lucky it's not criminal. Yet. Susan's rage turned to me. You did this. No, I said evenly. You did, when you ignored warnings. That evening, porch sitting with Lucky in his moss-lined box, breathing slow, I watched Susan's Lexus peel out. The land was wounded, but justice crawled forward, turtle-like, resilient. Sleepless again, I wandered the moonlit mound with a flashlight. The earth mutino owl hoots, no raccoon rustles. Each soil pile a grave for unseen lives, flattened for a view. In Turtle Hollow, the damp depression ringed by sweet gum and ferns, I unearthed another casualty. B12, a mature female turtle-eyed tagged in 2011, shell smashed, her breeding legacy snuffed. Not shock, but fury. This was negligence fueled by hubris, erasing lives and certainty of impunity. Not today. In my garage, I spread records, photos labeled, drives backed up, mound incident, primary evidence. I typed letters on my father's old typewriter, ink heavy with purpose. To the Attorney General's Environmental Crimes Division, timeline, violations of Endangered Species Act, precedents cited. To County Land Management, zoning fraud, deeds, overlays. To the press, curated package with haunting black and white shots of shells, nests, the bandaged Lucky now joined by Faith, the hatchling I'd found pushing through dirt. A short note to Susan, silence noted. Trespass documented. Violations prosecutable. 7 days or court. Wax sealed with my carved turtle stamp. Fallout hit day 3. Gazette front page, endangered species killed in HOA blunder. Quoting agents, photos of flagged scars. Neighbors whispered, huddled in parks, phones buzzing. Some knocked sheepishly. Is it true? I showed maps, data, introduced Faith. See for yourself. Day 5. Susan's lawyer requested mediation. I laughed too late. Laura, recommending prosecution criminal potential, hefty fines, permanent protections. She deserves it. A pause. I know what this mound meant, Robert. Remember when you showed me that sweet gum grove as a junior? Edge of the wild, you said. Hope they'd listen. Some learn only through fallout. HOA's emergency meeting packed the clubhouse, heat sweltering, articles waved. I sent Alex, a young conservationist. Wild doesn't grudge it recovers. But survivors remember. I won't vanish quietly. Susan's email blast, resignation, effective immediately. No victory dance, the land still bled. I planted grasses, saplings, milkweed. Built signs, cameras, invited classes for remote wildlife watches. Nonprofits funded Ridge Reborn Initiative. Faith's limp persisted, but her spirit inspired nudging pebbles, surviving. Federals returned 8:04 a.m., SUVs crunching pavement. Neighbors froze, curtains twitching. I waited with files and crate holding Lucky, Faith. Laura nodded. Ready? Buzzed the gate. Susan's voice guarded. Open for warrant environmental inspection. Gate clicked. Agents swarmed like precision. Samples, cords, tape, drone whirring. Susan emerged suited, heels sinking. Meaning of this. Federal site habitat destruction. Can't. Warrant says we can. You to me. Noyu bulldozed blindly. Didn't escalate. Had Toyo ignored. Laura, enough. Fines could top $250,000. Criminal, if named. Susan staggered inside. Team found more. Juveniles, nests, hawk traces. Clear-cut violation, an agent said. Neighbors volunteered fencing, cleanup. Change whispered. Courtroom sterile, dirt scented from boots. Susan silent, lawyers flanking. My suit. Trespass, damage, endangerment for injunction, not cash. Judge, boundaries clear. Intent, irrelevant results count. Faith's photo gasped court. Rescued post-bulldoze. 11 fatalities documented. Objections flew, Mara countered. They never asked. Witnesses, Laura, researchers, school principals' letter on lessons. My testimony. Promise to land turtles, birds, soil. They stole without knocking. Ruling. Liable $215K restoration, 5-year plan, apology, easement. Susan ousted, board shook. Ridge walked. Shoots, bees, rustles. Wild turtle nosed earth. Safe. Whispers, just dirt. To me, root soil cathedral. Restoration, deck quotes from kids, turtle didn't quit, so neither Mr. Robert. Benches, QR tours. Spoke schools, before/after slides. Why destroy? Didn't understand. Turtles back. If careful. Susan gone. House sold. Rumors lawsuits. HOA amended charter. Left me alone. Trust call. Nominated legacy site. Not my name Faith Ridge Sanctuary. Dedication fall. Sign unveiled. hikes, kids' delighted tracks. Reporter, fight to haven, refused disappearance. To doubters, if world breathes softly, growing wild listen. It matters. Frogs chorused return, resurrection sound. Sanctuary registered, deck blended, railings etched. Micah, turtle didn't quit. Benches, signs, tours. Keeper now mulch, fences, witness. Storm raged, land held rooted, strong. Spring, crows nested clumsy, loud. Welcome, hatchlings sighted B12's kin. Lucky, faith prepped release. Intimate, hard. Visitors, guilt, curiosity. Woman, for my kids someday. Family, nature wedding if plant promise. Ethan, Susan's nephew. See what she paved. Silence, wind. She said overreaction turtle thing. Read, saw kids too. Not turtles respect. She lost much. Took more. Help. Spade handed. Thistle needs pulling. He dug. Night. Enclosure open, insects singing. They crawled, tasting world. Tomorrow, release. Dawn purple, birds hushed. Coffee poured, enclosure last. They knew heads out, ready. Cedar box soil lined, path wound, grove, pond, willows, markers. Rezone mosaic life humming. Knelt, opened. Faith first, ferns vanishing. Lucky paused, looked back, soul goodbye. Gone. Sad, breeze bark scented. Not grief, peace, exhale. Justice, courts partial, true in roots, growth. Billy's drawing, smiling turtle. Thanks saving turtles, trees, quiet. Taped sinkside. Visitors, fiancé, walked kid now children. Wedding, yes, plant root. Land heals, redbuds bloom. Pool full, crow success. Shell flashes maybe them, new story. House same, but lighter land with me, sings. They called mound. Now faith ridge sanctuary voices lower, walk slower, listen. Just as soft lives heart crawling, flying, nesting. Hill fights roots, return, resilience. Outlast bulldozers, lies, bylaws. Moss grows light, touches wounds. Light stays. What do you think about the violence and injustice in everyday life? Like what happened here? Share your thoughts in the comments, take a stand, express your views. Let's discuss how we can fight back.